The danger for us is that our love is empty of any real substance. And for all of us as Christians, this should be our concern. We should be concerned that we don't just have an idea of love, we don't just have a sense of love, but that we are really, truly looking at our lives and our beliefs and measuring if our beliefs are producing real food, real bread and water in this world, because that is what we should be doing as Christians. In James 2, he says, "If a brother or sister is poorly clothed and lacking in daily food, and one of you says to them, 'Go in peace, be warmed and filled,' without giving them the things needed for the body, what good is that?" The lesson here is the spiritual reality for all of us. If our faith, if our religion is not producing real substance, a real nourishment of truth to others, then it's worthless. It's vain, it's empty, there's no substance. And the problem with our ideas of love is that they're just ideas. Our swelling notions of love is that they're just that. They're a passing vapor. They're not substance. They're not reality. And the task for all of us is to see if our ideas of love, our versions of love, are just sweet sentimental things, or if they are reality. And so many refuse to do the hard work of really fighting to have the reality of love. Because of this, our lives do not have that bread. They don't have that bread. They don't have that water of righteousness to offer to the world. Our lives are empty. We need to see is that us being satisfied with these things shows the sin in us. It shows how sinful we are. To be satisfied with a love that's not really loving, to be satisfied merely with the notion of love, merely the poetry of community, or whatever it is, which is very, very common in our generation in the church. To be satisfied with these, that is the very heart of sin, because the heart of sin in all of mankind is that we can like the ideas of goodness, like the ideas of wisdom, without really coming into what is actually good, what is actually wise, what is actually of substance of righteousness. So this reveals how sinful we are, that we're satisfied with feeling like I'm a loving person, rather than doing the hard labor of seeking the righteousness that is in Christ to have real love, to have a real love for our neighbor and a real love for God. The sin in the heart is exposed by how satisfied we are with these very tiny little ideas about love, and also how we take up ideas about love that are secretly just rooted in what we think is giving us a permission to be self-serving. This is so common in the church, where so many people talk about love, and they want others to be loving and gracious and support community, but all it's really rooted in is that they want to be served in their self-serving. They want to have a kumbaya circle around their self-serving ways, and not actually ever get past that sin in them, which is all about that self-serving. And so we can very much love that is not biblical, but is actually rooted in a self-serving. So we can very much love a love that is not about a real righteousness. It's opposed to it. It's opposed to real righteousness. And we love those things because we think it's a way to serve ourselves. We think it's a way to serve basically our sin, and or at least just not to really be called out of our sin. This is what so many people think love and grace is not being called out of sin, not being really held accountable. And so they want to serve a love that serves this, rather than a love that contends against this and really gets at sin. Here is where I think a lot of this springs from, is it ultimately springs from our very wrong views about God, our wrong views today about the gospel. We have ideas about the gospel, and we've had these ideas where the gospel is about a grace that's ultimately just not holding people accountable for their sin. It's taking away the accountability. It's taking away the expectation to live righteously. And because of this, we will never feel it is our duty to actually live righteously, to actually love others. We will always have a sour lip for our good enough attempts at love, which are ultimately just coming from the flesh, which are just coming from our sinful selves. And we will settle for these cute, stupid little ideas about love, and we'll never feel that it's our duty to actually persevere after a real righteousness. Why? Because our doctrine is rooted in this lie that God doesn't actually expect that of us. We profess to be about love, that we profess that this is about grace and this is about love, when it's contrary to it, because it's giving permission for that sinful self. It's giving permission to never be really held accountable, to change, to really come out of sin. And there's just grace for us remaining in that selfish, self-serving, ambitious, hateful heart, as long as we soften its edges, and as long as we act nice in it. But to really get out our sin, no, grace says that we don't have to do that. If we have sinful beliefs about what God's love is towards us, then we'll never feel accountable to pursue a real righteousness, and we will live and die in this petty love, this petty morality, thinking that that's all we owe God and man, and we'll never have something that pushes us beyond that, pushes us beyond our natural goodness, and expect us to come into a real righteousness, which is the very thing that God has made available through Christ. This is what Jesus died for, to put away sin from this world, to put sin out of us, and that we might walk in a real righteousness. So the problem is that people profess to serve God and profess to serve love when all they're really serving is themselves, because their very ideas about God, about the gospel, about righteousness are all rooted in never really being accountable to change, never really being accountable to do what is right to your neighbor. And instead of, oh no, there's always grace. There's always grace for how you wrong your neighbor, but there's never grace for them, for how you've wronged them. There's never grace, to expect justice and righteousness. And the blindness in these people's minds is that they call this love, and they don't see that their very idea of love is rooted in that self-serving love, saying, I get away with doing these wrongs to other people, but there's never justice for those people, expecting, justice in return for what I've done.